Can you hear me? It's working. Good. Thank you.
Hello. Let's see. We do have a quorum. We have opened the meeting previously to open the executive session. This is the Board of Education meeting, Monday, November 9th, 2020. I want to welcome board members, welcome presenters this evening, welcome Valerie and Melissa and Maureen, and any members of the public who are also with us. And with that, Valerie, if you have any announcements.
Sure, just a couple. First and foremost, I want to thank the board for approving the agreement with Putnam Northern Westchester BOCES for our public relations and communications specialist, Jason Platzner, who, as you already saw, highlighted a couple of stories which we have not seen in our Hastings happenings for a while, and so it'll be great to continue to see more stories of all the really wonderful things that are happening in the school district. So I just wanted to make sure that I made note of that, because he certainly is eager to be, to learn about the school system and to engage with all of our faculty and staff. He created a forum that anyone internally or externally can use if they know of a story or an event or something that's going on, that he can reach out to that individual and capture that story and celebrate those events in the district. He also hosted a Google Meet today to, internally to engage with faculty and staff who are here, but people are very busy, so he only had one or two people who participated. But he will be reaching out to the building leaders so that he gets a couple of minutes at the next faculty and staff meeting, so that he can introduce himself and just kind of remind everyone of how to access him and where he is. So I wanted to just mention that. I also wanted to just highlight a piece of what I know County Executive Latimer mentioned today, and he had a conversation this morning at 8:30 with the superintendent. So there's a standing meeting every Monday morning, and this has occurred since the spring, where the county executive, along with the leadership of the Westchester County Health Department, meets with all the superintendents just to give us any updates that they may have and help us to engage in problem solving around some of the issues that we all are sort of facing together. One of the areas associated with the micro clusters that has sort of become a feature now, given that we have a district in Westchester that's in the yellow zone. So 3 zones: the red zone, the orange zone, and the yellow zone. That what comes with that is the expectation that the school district has to find out or figure out a way to conduct testing of a certain percentage of students based upon which zone they may be in. We're not in one of those zones, so this is not to suggest that we are, but I wanted to bring to the attention of the board as well as the public that would require us to figure out how to do that. And we certainly are working with our health department, our local health department, as well as our Southern Westchester BOCES, which we receive, partner with the BOCES so that we can access some of the services, at a much more reduced cost, to see how we can, facilitate testing in the district. What would that look like? What would the cost be? Because it is a requirement if a district falls within one of these 3 color-coded clusters. So I just wanted to bring that to the attention. I don't know if you heard that in the press conference today, but that is a discussion point that the superintendents talk about fairly regularly. I also just wanted to bring to everyone's attention to please make sure that that if you're interested and you have the time, that you join us for a book study that was part of this past Friday's community update. It's 21 Lessons for the 21st Century by Yuval Noah Harari. It moves us back into focusing on life after the pandemic and our work of looking at how we're organized internally and how that aligns to the expectations for life, work, and future learning. So we look forward to those conversations and the work, and hope that that community members will join us on that book study. And that information will be available on our website, and obviously we'll remind the community throughout the week of the dates for those, as well as the Zoom links, which are the same and so forth. There are just 2 of those meetings to take care of that. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Valerie. At this point, if there are administrative comments, Melissa Szymanski.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. So just an update on the academic screeners. Students in grades 5 through 12 were recently screened in ELA and mathematics. We're now beginning the analysis process, and students who are potentially in need of referral to the MTSS team, which is a multi-tiered system of support team, would be determined by a below passing grade on the screener and also a current classroom average that's below mean performance. Follow-up screening would then take place, and as interventions are ongoing, students would be monitored. Our final Flex Wednesday was about a week and a half ago now, and that focused on part 2 of training in Nearpod, and this session was designed to focus on student-to-student engagement and the use of data to drive instructional decisions. The teachers were actually engaged in a collaboration board, and they were sharing ideas with each other. And then it was really fun to watch them participate in a gamified assessment so that their progress monitoring was illustrated by avatars, and they were moving their way up the hill. And so they really got enriched in terms of what the students would be experiencing. So we put the teachers in the seat of the learner. Time was also dedicated to investigating the Nearpod library of lessons and organizing their instructional resources within that web-based platform. Our chair council met last week to explore challenges related to assessment and related to grading in the remote and hybrid models. And I can say that this is a theme throughout our county. When I go to my job-alike role meetings, these are things that are new for districts in terms of how to do that well, particularly since some students are in the brick and mortar environment and others are learning remotely. So members of the team explored 4 questions in breakout rooms. The first, what are some of the challenges that we're facing with our formative and summative assessment practices? So how we gain assessments that is designed to inform our instruction, and also how do we know what students have been learning? And so what are some of the challenges we're facing in those things in the remote and the hybrid learning models? The second question, what challenges have we had surrounding grading? The third, how have we worked to overcome some of those challenges so that we could help each other to build capacity around that, to ensure that teachers, students, and families are receiving the feedback needed to support continuous improvement? And then finally, what practices should we discontinue and what should we grow and why? So some of the challenges that were outlined by the group including ensuring equity with assessment administration. So one of the challenges in assessing students is you have some students right in front of you in the brick and mortar environment and others who are remote, and making sure that there's equity in switching up what those models look like and when assessments are administered. limits with the capacity of technology to allow for quick personalized check-ins. It's so typical in a teacher's practice, moving throughout the day, that you would sidle up beside someone, you would have a quick conference, you would do a check-in, and having that personalized approach in this type of environment is much harder. So working through some of those challenges. Abstraction of the assessment. So there's an additional layer for students of having to navigate technology before then showing what they know and making their thinking visible. Successes have included the use of open-ended and analytical questions that are not easily searched through Google. And ideas for moving forward have included giving students open book tests that require critical thinking for them to synthesize information, and enhancing the use of authentic assessment with projects and performance tasks. So living in a world where we can readily Google something. Again, we've had some of these conversations when we were talking about the Dintersmith text last year around it's about what you can do with what you know, that we can Google something, but then how do we use assessment to really encourage critical thinking and synthesis? So some updates, and we're still in motion with those conversations and lots of good work ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. Maureen, did you have comments here, or are they coming later in the?
I just have one comment and just one little quick update, and then later I'll share under old business an update to the capital project. I just wanted to update the board and the community that we are beginning our budget process this week, and all the budget packets will be going out to our budget managers at each building, and we're ready to kind of commence our yearly budgeting process. The budget leaders at each building and managers, they work collectively with their staff and their grade level coordinators, along with the chair people, to start putting together projections around staffing, program, and materials. The budget calendar, which is really driven on legal requirements, will be presented to the board tonight for approval. It's under the business items. And again, this is a yearly requirement for us. There have been some initial rates that have come out from New York State around the retirement system, and we are getting some sense of how those numbers are going to shake out for us. Currently, they're projecting about 2 percentage points on the employee retirement system, where the teacher retirement system is a bit lower. But again, as we go through our budget process this year, and with working with Valerie, we'll be doing some things before a formal budget process begins to keep the public updated around this. So that's my comments for this evening, and I will later give an update to the capital project.
Lauren, I'm sorry. There's one more comment I wanted to make, and I apologize to our veterans that I didn't recognize that we're observing Veterans Day on Wednesday, November 11th. It's an opportunity for us all to think of the courage of all the men and women who have served to preserve our democracy and all the rights that we sometimes don't think about and and that we take for granted. So I want to recognize all of the veterans who are currently serving in the military, as well as all of those who gave sort of the ultimate, which is their lives, to honor what Roosevelt said, which was freedom is not free. And so being in the military certainly is a personification of that. So I just wanted to make note of that so that it doesn't get lost in the pandemic, but that is very important observance for us all to recall and know why it is remains a federal holiday for us to observe. So thank you to all the veterans.
Thank you, Valerie. And thank you, Maureen, for sharing the information you had also. And yes, under the business items, you will see the calendar of the budget process for this year. I see that Sabine is on the call, and we'd love to hear the student report.
Okay, hi everyone. I don't really have much to report tonight, so I'll just quickly go over a couple things. The end to a interesting sports season, to say the least, is near. Some sports have already finished, some are finishing next week. Today, the gold team was back in person after a full week online. SU is still working on fundraising and spirit ideas like shirts and a Coop tournament and fun stuff like that. And this week is also the last week of the first quarter. So a lot of students are kind of catching up on missing assignments and working on projects and preparing for tests. So yeah, that's really all I have to say this week.
Thank you, Sabine. And yes, thanks to all the students for their flexibility in moving in and out of the different way we've been operating school this year due to the pandemic. We will now have a portion of public comment. As we do have an outside presenter this evening, I want to ask that all public comment for this first period be for items that are addressing our agenda. If you have a comment about an item that's on our agenda this evening, please use the raise your hand feature in Zoom, and Melissa De La Barrera will call on you to make your comment. Any more general comments to the Board of Education about the district business can be made in the second portion of public comment, which is later in the meeting. Please keep your comments to 3 minutes and state if you're a resident of Hastings. Melissa, are there any participants raising their hand for this first public comment?
Yes, I have one. Stephen. There's no last name.
All right.
Stephen? You have to unmute yourself. I think he put his hand down. I tried to promote him, but oh. Stephen, you have to unmute yourself.
Okay, all right. Yeah, thank you. Sorry, I was kicked off inadvertently from Zoom. My understanding is that one of the discussion points tonight is to limit public comment to 30 minutes going forward. I want to express my really sort of concern about that, particularly in an age of COVID. It's really important that we have as much public communication as possible. The meeting like a month ago, we talked about the Hillside edition, also had a lot of people talking on both sides about their experience of wanting to be in school, not wanting to be in school. And if that had been limited to only 30 minutes, voices would really have been lost. And I think it's really important, especially in an age of COVID, that we not cut down communication, but we leave it open. Now, I know that Doug is no longer president of the school board, but I hope you follow his lead and in terms of trying to hear people talk, because he wrote an article in April in the Harvard Business Review where he talked about how business leaders are responding in this period. And he mentioned a CEO of a major corporation who shared an example, and I'm reading here, of a town hall that went over by an hour as colleagues in some of the hardest hit areas of the world shared their stories. And he quotes that, as leaders, we recognize that the need to hear and support one another was more important than the transactional needs at that moment. That simple insight can be easily missed among a bunch of type A professionals, but it's crucial. The former supports the latter over the long haul. He went on to say in his article, it could be argued that the suggestions outlined above are just good leadership, no matter what the circumstances. That may be true, but it misses an important point. Understanding good leadership and practicing it are two different things, especially in the face of uncertainty and one's own anxieties. In the weeks and months ahead, leaders need to move beyond themselves and stand in other people's shoes. Endure challenges on others' behalf. Be open and vulnerable. Experiment with ways of offering communication and support. Trust that caring and open-hearted leadership will not only pay off now, but also reap rewards well into the future. It's really important as a village that in this time of all times, when people feel cut off more than ever from public life, that you not cut down on public comment. What do you lose if you take a few minutes more here or there to let voices be heard? You really need to take that radical step of really being open to the community. And so, Doug, I hope that you encourage your fellow board members to follow your example of what you were arguing for there. That was in a business context. It's much, much, much more important in a community context. You can't afford to leave people behind. And that's what's going to happen if you try to cut public comment short. Thank you.
Lauren, nobody else has their hand raised.
All right. That will conclude the first public comment period. We have with us this evening Suzanne Volpe, excuse me, from Keenan Bean, the district's council. The school district has worked with NYSBA, the New York School Board Association, to do a full compliance review of the district's policies. And NYSBA has provided for the district a report that breaks down all of our policies and gives us suggestions for reviewing them. And so this evening, Dr. Henning Piedmont has invited Suzanne to review the compliance audit and to make suggestions to us for the policy committee mainly, but for the entire board to review the district's policies now that we have this full audit completed. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me? Great. I am here, as was said. Is my presentation shareable on the screen, on the Zoom screen? Could we do that? I prepared
Yes, Melissa could bring that up.
Great. I just prepared a few slides just to kind of give the Board of Ed, and obviously I worked with Dr. Henning Piedmont on this, to give us a way forward. When NYSBA came in with the policy audit, they gave a lot of information. So we just wanted to turn that into a plan, a strategy, a way to move forward. So if we could go to that's me. If we could go to the second slide. So the school board's policy audit, they recently completed an audit and they looked at the entirety of the district's policy book. It's approximately 275 board policies. And in so doing, they broke the policies down into in a few different ways. But the way that they did it that I thought was most instructive was they did it by action. And I believe that by action compliance review document was part of the materials for the meeting tonight. So they divided the policies into 4 different groups. Policies that school boards believes may be rescinded, policies that school boards believe need further review and revision, policies which school boards has updated and or expanded in its samples, and policies which NYSBA finds generally acceptable currently on our books. And then further, school boards recommended that the board consider 17 additional policies for review, calling them either new or missing. So if we could go to the next slide. So how to proceed. You know, in speaking with Dr. Henning Piedmont, and also in my experience, full top to bottom, soup to nuts reviews of policy books, they tend to take, 1 to 2 years. It could be shorter, could be longer. It really depends upon how many policies both the administration, the individual departments, and the board policy committee want to look at a time. But as you'll see, we've kind of come up with a strategy to prioritize and how to move forward. So next slide. So I think the place to start here is with the rescissions. So school boards recommended that there were, however many, I wrote it down. Of course, it's on my slide, 60 policies that could be rescinded. Now, the way that I believe that they have come up with this list, has to do with how school boards develops policies. They maintain a list of legally required policies, and none of the policies it recommends our board rescind are legally required. Anytime that my office does a policy review, and if I've worked with any of you in a policy review, you'll know that the first thing we look at is whether or not a policy is legally required or not. And if the policy is not legally required, the next question we ask is, are you abiding by what's on your policy books? So what we advise is you can have any policy that you want if it's not legally required, but you need to make sure that the district is abiding by it and that it's relevant and that it's current. So here, to that end, we would advise that we take a look at the policies that NYSBA recommends be rescinded, have those policies reviewed by relevant district departments, whether it be curriculum, whether it be personnel, administration, building, wherever we think the policies go, have the departments look at them to ensure that the policies are relevant, are current, and that they're abided by. Because if they're not, they need to be reviewed, they need to be revised to comport with district practice. So after that review, the board can determine what it wants to do with the policies. And what we definitely want to avoid is kind of a mass rescission. We don't want to just rescind 60 board policies. That could have an effect that we wouldn't, that would be an unpredictable effect at the beginning of it. So that would be, I think the first place to start is to get a look at this list of policies that are suggested to be rescinded. Dole them out by department, by relevant department, have the departments look at them. Maybe some can be collapsed. Maybe there's some information that is in a different policy altogether, and move from there. Okay, so the next slide. Thanks, Melissa. The next thing I think to do with this information from school boards, they've recommended 17 policies for review as either new or missing. We would suggest prioritizing the review and adoption, if necessary and or desired, of these 17 policies first. Now, these 17 policies appear at the very back of the document. And Dr. Henning-Piedmont and I went through and kind of picked the first 10 that we think are really the top priorities. These include accountability, school board governance, online distance and remote learning policies, pandemic planning policies, fiscal management, personnel goals, conflicts of interest, things out of the 17 that we think should sort of be fast tracked so that we can get a version to the policy committee, sort of sooner than later. Okay. All right, so the next slide. So the way that my office has done this, and I've done it in another district, the way we did it is we had the policies reviewed and redlined by the relevant departments and personnel. The red lines then come to my office, me specifically, or my office for review, after which the red line policies with all of our changes and input tracked then are provided to the policy committee for review, and then the final placed before the entire board for consideration. And at any point, I could, in another district, what I did was I would draft memos with the policies, giving the policy committee the information it needed to know about what something was redlined or something was removed. So we can do that in any way that the board sees fit and the policy committee sees fit. This is just my suggested process and how to conduct the review. But what we want to do is get everybody's input in first, so that when we know what we're presenting to the public is, the final, that all the stakeholders, internal stakeholders have had their input into it. Okay, and then I think we can go to the next slide. Just a couple other things to think about. As I said at the outset, non-required policies versus required policies, and what the board wants to do there. Choice of language and terms. We were talking about, Valerie and I were talking about, do we want to do he, she? Do we want to do the student? Do we want to use that sort, whatever kinds of language that we want to use to be the most inclusive? We want to use the most up-to-date terminology. So parent or person in parental relationship, things like that. And then also consistency of that language throughout all the policies so that they do, come out of this review looking uniform, looking of a piece, looking, looking as one coherent policy book. So that's really the roadmap that I would lay out to kind of conduct and begin this review. As I said, it's a lengthy process. Ultimately, I can speak further, or I can take questions or comments from the board. So why don't I go ahead? If anyone has any questions.
Thank you, Suzanne. I want to just address quickly the idea of a new policy being for pandemic policy. Particularly for the public that is with us in the meeting or maybe viewing in the future, it's not something that the board or the district was missing, but rather something that came into being a requirement post-COVID. So it's not as if districts had that in the books prior and we were missing out. But rather it's something that's a new requirement that's of course very obvious now, but wasn't prior. Hastings wasn't missing out on having that requirement in advance.
No, and there's another policy here marked as missing, which I think has more to do with how you administer your school lunch program than you were missing anything. So, I think the way that school boards may have just kind of gone line by line, not knowing that much about Hastings. So there could be policies marked missing, as you said, both that are new and also that are missing, but not something pertinent to Hastings.
Yeah. So do any board members have any questions for Suzanne about this process?
Terrific, we're doing it. It's a huge undertaking and it really needed to be done. So I'm thrilled that you're helping organize this and that we're gonna undertake it. I know it will take time.
It's a big to do. And what I found is, if we try to target, a batch every month, every other month, and kind of just steadily work through them. I think that's the best. It doesn't overwhelm anybody. It doesn't overwhelm the public. We don't want to overwhelm anybody with these kinds of changes. Anyone? I knew I'd make a PowerPoint and it would go smoothly.
It was very thorough. And
did you say how often it's generally recommended that a district engage in this type of process where they actually go through and review? Because I feel like there was a renumbering or perhaps an overhaul of policies that had taken place maybe around 2014, but I can't remember exactly what the last date was. So in terms of moving forward, and once we get through this process, which is probably going to be fairly exhaustive, when should we kind of keep it on our target so that we don't fall behind in the same type of a way? Not that we've specifically fallen behind, but just to stay on track.
I was going to say, you are not behind. I represent a lot of districts and you'd be surprised, but I did notice, I was going through your policy book a little bit today, and I did notice that there was a renumbering in 2014, and 5-6 years is probably about right. I was also looking at some of the policies that NYSBA recommended be rescinded, and they are policies from 20 years ago. that have never been updated. They were renumbered, but they were never revised. So I think if we are able to kind of clear some of that away, the next, batch review like this will probably not be as extensive. I wouldn't imagine it would be.
And having Suzanne involved is really critical because there's no way for us, to make a decision about, which of those policies that NISBA recommended to be rescinded, we would actually rescind. Like what, under what circumstances would that decision be made? And you absolutely need, the guidance of Suzanne, who serves in the role of, having expertise in the policy arena from our legal counsel, Keenan Bean. And so you absolutely need legal counsel guiding us in not only the, how we prioritize a list that NISBA, presented to us, but, how we should go through looking at those recensions, which I think was a really brilliant idea when Suzanne and I had a conversation last Friday, where she recommended, and take those and see which ones we're actually using, look at, which departments are actually using those, and that should be the sort of basis of determining whether they should remain or perhaps they should be included in another policy. Maybe there is merit, and then instead of having that language be shifted, maybe it becomes a part or incorporated into another policy or an existing policy, or that it really is, as Suzanne said, obsolete or it has been taken care of in a revised policy of some sort, which we know happens occasionally. So I want to thank Suzanne for that recommendation, and then just using that portion of policies that are ones that require our attention as sort of the next phase in terms of how we use our time this year. So I'm really grateful for Suzanne providing that guidance for us as we move forward. And our policy committee, does meet once a month, and that is obviously a meeting that is publicized, and anyone on the public can join. So it includes Lauren Berman as one of our board trustees who participates, as well as Jeremy Gallen as a new member this year, Melissa Szymanski, myself, Melissa Della Barrera, and Fee Goodman, who has been in the district for many years and certainly has a lot of background knowledge and brings that to this process. So that will be how we proceed and move forward, and our process of bringing those particular policies forward would be first through a first read. We have a policy that represents that tonight. So the board reads twice, first read, and then if there's any need to go back and revise, or if it isn't, just to sort of give, have the board have another opportunity to think about it, it becomes a second read. And then after that point, it moves forward. And Melissa Della Barrera would then move that to NISBA, and NISBA manages our policy repository that's in board docs. So if any revisions are made by NISBA, and then that goes into officially the policy library. So thank you, Suzanne, for giving us a framework to continue to proceed with the work of the policy committee.
No problem. And we're here to help, and excited to get started. And we'll go from there. If there's nothing further, I can hop off the board meeting. I had to mute my microphone because my 4-year-old's running around, but I'm happy to see everybody's face. It's nice to see everyone's face, and hope to see you guys soon. And I appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Suzanne.
Thank you,
take
Suzanne.
care.
Have a good evening.
All right. So the policy committee will be meeting later this month. And again, that notice will go out publicly to continue this work. At this point, Valerie, I know you'd like to speak about Jason Platzer, our new public relations and community specialist.
Sure, thank you, Lauren. So Jason just started last week. He is part of the Putnam Northern Westchester BOCES system that allows districts to be able to access expertise such as Jason to serve in this particular arena of public relations and communications, which is really vital for school districts. He is here. We just added him as a panelist. And so what he's going to do is just give us a little bit of his background. We did indicate that we would bring him to this particular, invite him to this particular meeting. And then he'll also talk about some of the things that he is engaged in now in service to our overarching goal of making sure that he promotes all of the really amazing things and that are happening in the school district through the various platforms that we use to communicate to our community, whether it's the Hastings Daily or the Hastings Happenings, information on our website in different locations, as well as a use of our of the various social media platforms. And so he'll talk to you about some of the things that he's been engaged in and looks forward to continuing to work on. Jason? There he is. Hi,
Hello.
Jason.
Welcome, Jason.
Thank you very much. Hi, everyone. It's nice to see you. It's nice to meet you. It's nice to be here. It's a pleasure working with Hastings-on-Hudson, doing everything I can to get some of our stories out. So a little about me. I'm from New Rochelle. I went to SUNY Purchase with a BA in journalism and history. I've worked for a few media organizations, a lot of them local, News 12 Westchester, the Guidance Center of Westchester. I've worked for Burke Rehabilitation in White Plains, and also the Governor's Office of Storm Recovery. And mainly doing a lot of storytelling and creating content for them. That's pretty much what I'm best at. And so far within the school district, I've been finding stories and trying to get, a lot of positive stuff out. There's a lot of great stories here, and I'm trying to expand our presence online and social media as well. Get a lot of integration between everything, and hopefully reach a lot more people than we already are. I mean, there's already a great audience with a lot of good feedback. So I'm really trying to expand an already great platform.
Well, thank you, Jason, for joining the team in Hastings. And certainly the board is very pleased to have you in this role to provide our community and the greater community just some more knowledge about what is happening in our school district. So we welcome you and welcome the opportunity to work together. I don't know if board members have any comments or words of welcome.
I would just say I'm really looking forward to your support. I think to paraphrase an old Winston Churchill saying, the bad news is halfway around the world before the good news gets its pants on. And, I think we've got to tell a lot of those stories. And there's so many of them, sometimes they only come out and, a student sharing at a board meeting or, an email that goes out to a very narrow set of people in the district, but they don't make their way into a broader audience. So I think it's critical. So really look forward to your support in that.
Thanks.
Hi, Jason. I'm actually not Allison Andrus. I'm Jody Meyer, but I'm having a little trouble getting on. I just want to welcome you to actually a really wonderful district. And I think you're going to start to find a lot of incredible stories. One of the things that we have done a lot in the past, and I think because of COVID, it makes it more difficult, but maybe you can help Valerie with it, is at the beginning of board meetings, we often do a sort of a review of different of stories going on in the district, of stuff that kids are doing at all levels. And I think that would be a wonderful, relatively easy, since we have board meetings, since we have them all the time, it's not like getting it out into the newspaper or whatever, to kind of showcase some of the wonderful things It's easy for all of us to hear about the complaints, but it's lovely when we can hear about some of the really wonderful moments that happen in Hastings. So I look forward to your helping us with that.
Thank you.
Welcome aboard.
Thank you.
One thing that occurred last week was the Our Schools presentation, the first installment of that, which all school leaders and department leaders participated in. And I was unable, as I had a family engagement at the same time, to see it live, but I watched it today. And I think, I think within that presentation, pieces of it can be teased out to be messaged as smaller stories or sparks to other stories. So I would, I think there's a lot of material, and I'm really pleased that you're here to help find what those sparks could be. So welcome. And I know that a message went out to the community welcoming you, and it included a link so that anyone, student, staff, or family member could address you with any particular news that they thought was newsworthy. So I hope people take advantage of that and really connect with you so that we can begin to really share some of the exciting things that happen here. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks, Jason. And Jason's here every day, 5 days a week, 5 hours a day, and you're going to quickly see a lot of the content that is really such a rich story of all the wonderful things happening here in Hastings. So we're glad he's here. Thanks for joining us, Jason.
No problem.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Well, we can move on to our business items. We have 6 items under business A. Are there any questions or comments about these business items? Is there a motion to approve business items 1 through 6?
So moved.
And a second?
Second. Oh. Jody.
Second.
All in favor? And yes, under the business items just approved, item 3 is the budget calendar that Maureen mentioned. So if board members could take a look at that so you can anticipate those discussions at the various meetings and also the public hearing. Those dates should be in your calendars. There are placements for CSE and CPSE. Are there any questions or comments about those placements? Is there a motion to approve the placements for CSE and CPSE?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
All in favor? Okay, under personnel, there are a number of appointments. Appointments 1 through 14. Are there any questions or comments about these appointments? Is there a motion to approve the appointments 1 through 14?
So moved.
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
All in favor? Under amendments, there are 15 amendments. Are there any questions or comments about these amendments? Is there a motion to approve amendments 1 through 15?
So moved.
And a second? All in favor? That was Allison who seconded, Melissa. I don't know if you saw her hand. And I just want to comment that these amendments are largely to provide coverage for leave requests. And I want to thank those within district who've provided additional coverage to their colleagues. I think that's a testament to the kind of staff we have, that folks are willing to provide that coverage. There's also items 1 through 3 on leaves of absence. Are there any questions or comments there? Is there a motion to approve the leaves of absence 1 through 3?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
All in favor? All right, we'll move on to the minutes. There are the minutes from October 26, 2020, a regular Board of Education meeting. I do want to comment that there was a policy approved, policy 1230, that's included in the minutes. And the board did approve the revision to that policy at that meeting. However, we did want to provide a second reading or an opportunity for another discussion this evening. As we heard earlier from our public, and we've also individually heard from the public, either approval or disapproval of our revisions, we wanted the board to have another opportunity to discuss it. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of October 26, 2020? Is there a second? I saw Allison.
Second.
All in favor? Okay. So under old business, yes, we provided a second reading of our policy 1230, which is our policy on public comment period during Board of Education meetings. And the reason, again, just to reiterate the discussion that began first in the policy committee, but then also in the board meeting on October 26th, the reason why the model of our public comment period was suggested to be revised was for 2 reasons. One, it is atypical for boards not to have a limitation on the board comment period. And secondly, that we were receiving feedback that its model without a limit was not sustainable. It's sustainable in that our board meetings were exceeding 4, 5, almost into 6 hours sometimes as a result of unlimited public comment period. And without focusing also the comments on the agenda at hand. So at the last board meeting, we discussed the fact that that there are other opportunities for the public to engage with the board, and I personally want the public to engage with me as a trustee, with the board as a whole, and I feel like I receive that type of engagement, whether it's phone calls, emails, whether it's engagement in public comment during the board meeting. But without a limitation, our employees of the district, some of whom have been on site since 6, 7 a.m., are sometimes in our buildings working and attending our board meetings till midnight. and then up and rising and doing that all over again. That is a concern to me personally. And I do appreciate the comments that Mr. Goldfinger brought forward earlier in the meeting, quoting a well-written article by Doug about leadership really listening to the public. But that was in a business context. And I really do feel that our public school employees deserve to have their participation in our board meetings be succinct so that we can move forward with the business we have at hand. And the comment period is also not the best way to engage with the board. I feel like, or to engage with the topics that are brought forward to the board, rather. There are other ways that parents, community members can address the concerns they have that may have more impact or may have more of the result they're seeking than bringing them forward to a board meeting. I think discussing issues with teachers, with building leaders, with department chairs, with principals, or with the superintendent or other central office employees might serve the concerns better than bringing them to a board meeting, primarily because I feel that the board is not in a position to engage and have a real dialogue about concerns that are brought forward. Whereas individual meetings, individual phone calls, individual sessions with a school leader can result in more dialogue. I think also that there are times where we do have unlimited public engagement, and those are set in the calendar as public hearings. We have public hearings at the start of every school year around our safety plan, around our code of conduct, and at the end of the year regarding our budget. We've also, as a board, provided public hearings with unlimited contact and dialogue around the bond, for example, around big discussions around concerns of the operational model of our schools over the summer. So when we have had moments that have required a greater time for listening, we've allowed it. But in terms of our regular board meetings, the policy committee brought forward the change in order that our meetings, these business meetings, can be conducted in a respectful way to the administration and to the timing and the already out of time dedication that they provide to the district. I don't know if any other board members want to speak to the changes to this policy.
I'll just say that I think it makes sense. I can think about probably on two hands the amount of times the last 4 years where we've had big issues come up, and almost always we do have, as you said, public hearings about those. I can think about some personnel challenges that have occurred. I can think about the bond, as you mentioned, the ones that are already in the calendar. And if you take those issues aside, and then you look at every other public comment section, it's rare that until this COVID moment, it's gone over. I mean, I think 2 or 3 commenters is pretty standard for many, many years, unless again, it's one of those big issues where we do tend to have a public dialogue. So I think that it's a policy that, makes a lot of sense. And I do think that there's going to be, there's again, half hour is not a short amount of time. I think we saw tonight, we used maybe 3 minutes of 30 minutes. So that's, critical. And it's not that we're getting rid of it, but your points, Lauren, I think are really excellent, that asking our administrators to burn the candle at both ends, especially when topics being discussed are not ones that are on the agenda, is really, it's kind of the downside. But that being said, I just like Lauren said, now having come off of 2 years as president, I believe very strongly that we have to have venues. And if we find out that there's this body of content that needs to be talked about that's coming up over and over again, we'll figure out a way to make it happen. You know, we're never wanting to shut down dialogue, but this is really a way to make sure that everyone can stay and engage productively. So, thank you.
And just as a point of clarification, by looking at the policy, there are two 30-minute periods of time for public comment. Yeah, so it's a full hour that that's dedicated in the policy. The first 30 minutes is at the beginning of the meeting for the public to speak to any item that is on the agenda, and it is 3 minutes per public comment just on items related to the budget, I mean, to the agenda. And at the end of the board's agenda, there's another 30 minutes for the public to comment on any remark that they'd like to make. It doesn't have to pertain to the agenda. And that is the public gets 2 minutes to make, to comment, or each individual who would like to comment. So it is a full hour. And it's time before the agenda, about the agenda, and at the end about other remarks that the public would like to make. So the difference between the revisions of 1230 and the former policy was that there wasn't the specific language delineating the amount of time, as well as having it before and after, which is pretty common, in my own experience and being in other school districts, that it is delineated, and the amount of time is typically 2.5 minutes rather than 3 minutes, for the first section. So, so I just wanted to make sure that those points were also, made clear in this policy.
So my only question about this, and I understand it, and it obviously makes sense, but what if people come to the meeting hoping to make a comment, and there are more people than 30 minutes can accommodate? And how do we decide who gets to speak and who doesn't get to speak? And
Well, I can tell you, Jody, that the policy committee reviewed other districts' policies, and it's generally a first come, first serve type of scenario. And, I think we're human, so that, if we have 10 speakers who want to speak on our agenda, 11 speakers who want to speak on our agenda items at the beginning, we're not going to cut off that one person from speaking. I wouldn't do that as president. Of course, they'd be able to have their 3 minutes up at the start if it's about our agenda. So it's not that we need to be so hard and fast and stringent, but rather there needs to be a parameter so that we can anticipate, and more importantly, the administration can anticipate when the closure of the meeting is going to occur. So it's generally a first come, first serve. And typically the language and other policies around us is that folks sign their name in when they arrive at a meeting to indicate that they want to participate in the public comment period. But as we're meeting remotely, the only way to indicate that is to use the raising your hand. So that's how we're going to proceed, and not change the language of doing so as we're meeting remotely, as we're allowed to under the governor's orders right now. But certainly I recall in previous years having signed my name in when I arrived, indicating that I wanted to speak at one of our board meetings as a community member. So that used to occur. And certainly we could do that again in practice when we begin to meet in person again, when that might occur.
well, I'm just saying, I think we have to try this and see how it works. At some point, we're going to get back to having in-person live meetings with people sitting in the room with us. And I know people come and sign in for the meeting. I don't know if there's a separate list if you want to make a public comment. I don't think there is, but
I remember filling it out.
okay, well, there may be.
Yeah.
It's been too long since I've been on that side of it, but
Yeah.
But I just I could imagine, I have a vision of some board meetings that we've had when the entire room is filled and people jockeying to be the one to get up to the mic. And I just think that we need to try this and see how it goes.
I agree, Jody. I do also concur with Doug that, when those moments have occurred, we've made decisions to be inclusive of the participants. And of course, if there are issues that we know are arising, we've set aside particular meetings to have public dialogue around important topics.
Building on what Jody said, though, earlier in the year, I thought we were having residents email Janine before the meeting. And seeing that we're not going to in-person meetings during winter, it seems, I do think that's something we probably have to bring back. There has to be a way to have first come, first serve. And emailing Janine seems to be the way to do it instead of the raise your hand with the digital option right now.
Melissa.
Right. Emailing Janine worked in the past, and now we have to, thank you, Jody. Emailing Melissa would be a better way than having her try to judge which of the 13 yellow gold hands came up first.
I think that makes sense, Jeremy. I think we can certainly, in the next posting of our meeting, now that we're adopting this policy, we can have, for our next board meeting, when the public notice goes out, it can say, if you'd like to speak at public comment, please send an email to Melissa De La Barrera, indicating whether it's an agenda item or a general district concern. And then we can shuffle those accordingly. So we have already approved the changes to this policy. Are there any additional comments or thoughts about it?
I would just say, there's a reminder to the public that it's always the intent of the Board of Education to hear, the public's comments with an open mind, and for you to know that it's really important for us that we incorporate your comments so that we have an orderly, structured, and productive meeting, because we are conducting the district's business and we are prescribed as a public entity to conduct that business under certain prescribed circumstances, because we have to adhere to open meeting laws. And so, certainly from our perspective, we want you to be aware of what it is that we're doing, and we want to do it in a fashion that's most productive for you, the public, and for administrators, and to be respectful of everyone's time. So for that reason, I was supportive of this policy shift.
Thank you, Sylvia. Maureen, it looks as if you have a construction update for the board next under old business.
Yes, thank you. Melissa, if you can please share the few slides I put together to the screen. Thank you. You can just go right to slide 2. You can go to the next slide. Thank you. So tonight I'm just going to give a quick update in terms of the work that we're kind of closing out right now. So here at the Farragut complex, giving the board and the public a roofing update. The roof here at this building will be completed by mid-November. So we're anticipating another week or so, and then some detail work after that. But the roof is very close to being final, at the final completion. The parapet walls that we had a lot of discussion about have been removed and reconstructed. There's also this week where they'll be doing some test samples of the cornice that in a variety of areas to get a sense of the condition, and to help us plan around the replacement of that, which on the next piece there, you'll see that work would be occurring this summer. And there's a large fabrication that needs to occur of that cornice. So now looking at doing some of those testing of different areas that will allow them to work on those shop drawings. Next, please. So I've just included tonight some photographs. We had shared with the board at an earlier time when the parapet wall, the condition required us to execute a change order to have that wall rebuilt. And here's some photographs of the final project. You'll see on one side the block wall in the first picture on the left, and that's on the wall that's facing in toward, not out toward the street, but inward. And on the other side of that is the photograph all the way to the right, where you'll see the finished brickwork. That is all brand new brick and cement block. The wall is 3 brick deep on the exterior, and then the cinder blocks you'll see there are facing us on the interior walls. And that was around the entire area in which the roof was being replaced. So that was an entire wall that was taken down and then reconstructed, and with all new materials. You can see that in the middle photograph there, it shows what the wall looks like when there's some wrapping, that there's wrapping that goes over that brick to secure the roof finishing there. So you can proceed to the next slide, please. Again, these are some additional photographs of, on the left is again a part of a wall that has been replaced. In the middle photograph, you'll see that was last week, and it was showing a part of the roof, and that was one of the final roof parts that were being finished. And the different layers that are down, the white material in the front of the photograph is actually like an insulation that's put down, and there's a variety of layers and vapor barriers and another membrane that goes down to complete that roof. So that was an area which they were finishing up, and they were really making very good headway. And thankfully the weather cooperated for us last week and this past weekend. And on the right, you'll see the photograph there is the, on the lower part of the photograph is the actual cornice that I was speaking about. And that again wraps around the building. And that's what we're probing this week to get a sense of the way it's fastened and the condition of the brick underneath, and just to plan for the replacement of that detail around the building. Next slide, please. Again, this is so the board members had an opportunity during the board walkthrough in the prior to school beginning. We went down and we looked at the Farragut complex boiler. It is now completely finished. We're using it to heat the buildings. So the Farragut had an installation, a removal, and a complete gut of the boiler room, an installation of 2 brand new boilers, I'm sorry, and all the piping work that goes along with that. Also the room, the entire room was painted and the floor was sealed. There was a brand new heating controls that were installed to operationalize those boilers, as well as new exit steps out of the boiler room, a boiler room door, an exhaust system that when the boilers go on, it opens up louvers in the room. So if you proceed to the next slide, please. So here we see the finished project. All of everything that you see in that room is brand new. That room was gutted pretty much beyond the boilers. Again, all the you can see all the tubes up on the top, the ones that say heating water supply, all of those were replaced. And the boiler room floor was also resealed and painted. So they did a terrific job. And next slide, please. And again, I just mentioned those exterior steps, and the on the first picture to the left, and the venting system, which is the silver item right next to the steps on the wall. And that when the boilers go on, that actually is those open actually to allow exhaust of that out of that space. So they did a fantastic job with a very large gut in those boilers, and they have been functioning well since they were put on about a few weeks back. And as we've discussed before, that we have about 30 years on those boilers. So we're very happy that that is behind us, and that they are working to heat our building. Next slide. And again, this was just the control panels. These are the new controls, and pretty interesting when you go down there and just to see how all these things are wired up. And again, they're all, we can log into these systems and control the heat both, remotely as well, and get a sense of all the room readings in the building. So that control panel allows us to do that. And that's it for this evening. As we've mentioned before, the Hillside roofing project that had completed at the end of the summer. We're wrapping up the roof project now, and we're hoping to begin some of the mobilization of Hillside in the coming months. Thank you.
Thank you, Maureen.
Welcome.
Are there any questions or comments from board members about the roofing and the boiler work?
Thank you to Maureen and Joe and the whole team for shepherding it through. Appreciate it. Looks great. Boiler looks great. Looks better than when we saw it, and there's pieces all over the floor. Looks great. looks good.
I thought you would appreciate it because you saw it when it wasn't yet completed. So it is pretty interesting to see it come together.
I also want to thank Joe, especially during all of COVID, being able to get all this stuff done. But I have to say, it's very sweet to see the new boiler. Glad that it's finally something that we've been able to do. And I'm glad that we did it before we had a major disaster that forced us to do it. So that's a great thing. And thank you, Joe. Thanks, Maureen.
Welcome.
Yes, thank you, Maureen and Joe, and all of the staff members that have really helped with these projects and moving them forward. Even the folks in your office, Maureen, not just the folks with their hands dirty. So thank you. And I just have to ask, the next time you go up to the roof to take pictures, to take one looking out, because I've always wondered what it looks like out on the river from that viewpoint. I'm sure.
Oh, it is beautiful. I'll take you up there. It actually is very nice. It is very nice, the view up there, which is a nice, when I had to go up last week, especially when the weather, it was such a nice day. Joe said, I'll take the rest. I'll go up and get the photographs because it's
take a picture looking out next time.
Best view in town, right?
Yes.
Yes, thank you, Maureen and Joe and the entire team who has been working silently and diligently behind the scenes to make this happen. And, for those who don't know anything about boilers, at least the board was, present, those who were able to go on the walk to observe the progress of the boiler room. And that had to be built from scratch. So what you saw didn't represent, what they actually had to do, the kind of labor that goes into that. And hopefully that will be there for the next, 50 years, because it is a huge project and a huge undertaking. And, I think Joe, and I know you have the same sort of mindset, Maureen. All of you are kind of like builders, you like putting things together and watching them come together. And that really is the embodiment of the people who think like you and Joe. So, and all the other team members. So thank you.
And then one last thing I said to Joe the other day, in movies, a lot of times boiler rooms or like you have a sense of it's this like really dark and dismal place. And I said to Joe, this is actually a nice room to be in. It's such a, nice, clean space. They did a fantastic job and they're just, finishing the lighting in that room. I said, it's actually not a bad place to be. So no, yeah, it's been amazing. And we thank the community for their support. And, these are just such critical infrastructure projects. And, thankfully we were able to pass a bond and having the roof, both of the buildings done and the boiler and just those key infrastructure projects, including, although, we weren't thrilled about the fact that the parapet walls had to be rebuilt. And, just knowing that the work that's being done is going to serve the community for 30 plus 50, like you said, maybe 50 plus years, we can hope that that work will be here and doing what it needs to do for the community for many years ahead. So we're glad to have those projects done.
Yes, thank you, Maureen. And yes, the support from the community to get these projects done was invaluable. So we'd like to now open it up for the second public comment. Again, if you would like to, in this meeting, participate, it would be to use the raise your hand feature. Please state your name and if you're a resident of Hastings, and we will be capping the time limit for each participant to 2 minutes.
I had received an email from David Zweig.
Oh, hey. Oh, I'm first or maybe the only. I don't know. Oh, I can't hear you. Are you there?
Yes, you're first.
Oh, okay. All right. Should I go? Okay. I'll try to go quick. I thought it was 3 minutes. Now I understand it's only 2. Thanks for letting me join in. Appreciate it to everybody on the board. One thing that and I know for speaking for a number of parents, regarding the school closure policies, it's very confusing to a lot of parents what happens when the schools are closed. And we're an educated community, so if we're all confused, then I think that's probably a communication problem. Specifically, we want to understand who advised the superintendent or what guideline specifically recommends closing an entire school for one case, or in this instance for Hillside, for a suspected case. We just want to understand who is advising this and on what basis. From what I know from all the epidemiologists who I interview on a regular basis, this is not in line with any procedures that I'm familiar with. I'm not saying it's wrong, but we just would like much more clarity on this point. And obviously this has happened numerous times. Related to that, in my view, if we have the school in a hybrid model in these cohorts, this should be viewed as a complete failure if we have to close an entire school for one case. Something is going wrong with the policies and how the school is conducting itself if one teacher is exposing him or herself to that many colleagues and students. And this happens every single time. So perhaps the district can look at a different way of having the school function where they are not exposed to that many people. Related to that point, I'm still not understanding why, if my son, for example, is not one of the contacts and his teacher isn't a contact, why they can't be in school. Something about that doesn't seem to make sense to me. And I think in the past, some of the emails have stated for safety reasons, the school couldn't be opened. That also doesn't make sense to me. So this sort of is a theme of clarity with communication from the district. We are an educated district of parents here.
You'll have to wrap it up.
Thank you. We're an educated district. There is a problem if we're not understanding over and over what the district is communicating to us. Thanks a lot for letting me voice my 2 minutes here.
Thank you. Next, we have a Jennifer Destin.
Hi, everyone. Jennifer Destin, 140 Fairmont Avenue. I know it's all said and done, and I appreciate the impetus of wanting to have more efficient and more timely board meetings. And I also feel very strongly that our current board and current administration and current school leaders are people who create open paths of communication and want to hear from community members. But I feel I would be remiss, given truly the very long period of time that special education parents had to use the platform at Board of Education meetings when there were different players involved, to have an opportunity to amplify their voices and really bring light to things that were happening in the only way that they could at the time. So my concern is that while this policy will likely work very well when I'm looking and seeing all of you people on the board and all the administrators we currently have, to limit it to 30 minutes in writing when we don't know what the face is going to look like 5 years, 10 years, concerns me about marginalized groups having the opportunity to amplify their voices. That's all.
Next, there is Stephen. There's no last name. Please state your full name.
So am I being invited to speak again? My Zoom went out again. Okay.
Oh, okay. I
Go ahead.
apologize. You already spoke.
Yeah,
No,
okay.
I saw
No,
your hand raised.
no, I would like to follow up, please. First of all, Lauren, I would want to absolve Mr. Goldfinger from being, associated with my remarks. He has a reputation to defend, perhaps. So, and also, I do strongly agree with the previous comment, but it also disturbs me. Just a few quick comments that you said, Lauren, that this policy had already been adopted. And that means that it was adopted, it sounds like, before you heard public comment. And that's just another undemocratic process that's disturbing. The reality is that when you say that you set aside time for major issues, the point is that it's the public who needs to determine what the major issues are. Just like the previous commenter said, unless the public could decide what issues mattered, and it is only in these forums that voices can be amplified. I came to that first meeting about the Hillside edition, wanting to talk a lot about that, but found myself stunned mostly into silence by hearing the parents talk about their concerns about having to come to school, not being able to send their kids to school. That wouldn't have been heard if that had been part of some scripted thing. The problem is if the board determines, says, well, this is an important issue, we're going to have public comment on this, then you aren't listening to the community. And that's really, really, really troubling, particularly in a community like Hastings. We moved to Hastings because we thought it was a different kind of community. And this is becoming a very undemocratic process. It's really disturbing. And I would say lastly, that to say that Doug's comments apply to business and they don't apply to the civic life, that is frightening notion. Civic life matters more than corporate life. And if you take our civic life away from us by you determining, I don't mean you personally, Lauren, but the board determining what issues can be talked about, what issues are worth public time, that is really, really discouraging. It's not the community I moved to. So I please reconsider that. It's really important to take Doug's article seriously to apply to all contexts. Thank you.
Sir, may I please have your last name?
Yes, it's Siebert, Siebert, and I am a Hastings resident.
Thank you. Okay. Nobody else has their hand raised at this time, but I did receive 2 emails. Should I read them? Okay.
Yes, sure.
The first one I received was from Candace Aloisi. Hello, my name is Candace Aloisi, and I have a 6th and 3rd grader in the district. The detrimental impact of the excessive screen time on children has been extensively studied and is well understood. I won't detail those health concerns tonight. To the extent that we remain in the hybrid model, there is an amount of screen time that is necessary by design. But I am concerned about unnecessary additional screen time that is being added to our children's days. Virtual platforms are also not ideal for all types of learners. I think we all know that some people work and read better on paper from books, and I am concerned that hard copy formats have been virtually eliminated from many of our students' classes. I believe we should have no screen time during in-person classes, that material should be in books and on paper while in class. I also believe that there should be no assigned screen time for homework on programs like iExcel or BrainPop. Screen time should be limited to the many hours students must spend in remote classes, but never assigned beyond those hours for reading or homework. Our schools need to distribute textbooks, workbooks, and handouts. Hard copy materials pose no risk of transferring coronavirus, but excessive screen time has known and serious health effects. I understand that in normal times, students would use Chromebooks in class, but that was before they were required to attend class on screen for many hours a day, many days. I'm requesting that the district eliminate unnecessary screen time and online work outside of remote class for our children's health and safety. Thank you for your time and attention. And I received another one from Mohini Shapiro Arditi. She's a parent of a second and an 11th grader. Can the board clarify why the whole school is closing tomorrow? I wasn't able to understand the community update. It seems, unless I am misunderstanding, that many in the Hillside community would be contacts of a contact at this point. Current DOH and CDC guidelines do not require isolation of contacts of a contact, and yet the whole school is being effectively quarantined as contacts of a contact, at least temporarily. And even if a staff member tested positive, wouldn't we shut down just the classes affected by the situation? Can you please clarify the protocol on this decision? I'm well versed in much of this as I receive guidance information regularly in my professional life. And I have not seen anything like this being done anywhere else, again, unless this is something I do not understand. Our younger children desperately need to be in school to learn. I understand the reasons why we would need to close because infection rates get too high. And I understand that children and staff will need to be quarantined because of an exposure to a COVID positive person. But I do not understand why the entire school is closed tomorrow because of a potential case of a staff member. Every day that the school goes remote is a challenge for our son. I just want to know that it is worth it. And there's one more community member with their hand raised. Brian. Brian?
I was muted. Can you hear me now? I'm Brian. I'm a Hastings resident. I have kids in school here. I think I want to follow up on the last few calls about why school gets completely closed for one case. I want to know about the books also. I watched my daughter read a book that was a YouTube video with an ad in front of it with words moving around on the screen. Half the time the text was not even on the screen. You can probably hear in my voice the desperation that we've been facing here, trying to understand what the plan is for the school to get kids in full time, reverse remote teachers, anything. How is it going to happen? What are the milestones? Where is a decision going to be made? What we know what we don't know, but we can isolate factors and say, if this and if that, then we can consider this and that. My sister lives in a town in Connecticut with the same amount of people as Hastings. They've been in school full time from day one. They've had 5 to 6 to 7 to 12 to 15 cases in that town. They go to school. They have similar facilities. The evidence is mounting daily that the kids are not spreading this. And I know my friends ended up spreading this in that town because they went out to a restaurant to support the local business. My daughter is more careful with the masks than adults are. we need to know, working families need to know, when do we have to take money out to send our kids to private school? Because the time is now for September if there's no school in September, or the time is now to leave. And I dial into these meetings and I hear nothing about a plan. And maybe again, like all these other callers, I must be missing something. That's all I've got to say.
Thank you. Brian Jacobs.
Am I up?
Yes.
Hi, this is Brian. I have a Brian as well, like the last commentator. I have a 6th and 3rd grader. I want to echo all of the comments that have just been made. I think that the online resources, as they've been called, are not school. IXL, Brain Pop, YouTube, these things are not school. I've worked on IXL with my kids in their old school, and here, it's a video game and it should not be getting assigned as classroom work. It is not possible to learn math from IXL, and the fact that we're using that instead of textbooks is outrageous. I also want to echo what the other Brian said about the lack of a timeline or plan to get kids back into school. What benchmarks need to be met? What needs to happen before our kids can go back to school? I think a lot of people in the community want to hear what needs to happen before our kids can get back into school. What benchmarks need to be met? What is the timeline? Thanks again for listening, for all the work.
Thank you. Joshua Seltzman.
Like that.
Joshua.
Oh, can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Great. Hi, Josh Saltzman, 13 Crossbar Road. I have 2 kids at Hillside. I think several other parents have said things that I completely agree with about the school closures. So I don't want to be redundant to them, but I just want to add that I think it would be really helpful. You know, we've had some nice slide presentations on the addition plans that were very informative. I just think it would help, you know, if I keep hearing very vague reasons for why school can't be open for more grades full time, or why it can't be open full time. Vague reasons about, you know, sometimes it's teacher concerns, or sometimes it's staffing issues, sometimes it's budget issues, but I just don't feel like I'm getting any concrete understanding of either why we can't open or what it would take to open. And I think it would be great if the board could, you know, perhaps put together some kind of presentation, tell us specifically what are the issues, what are the budget things that are preventing us from opening, what are the staffing issues that are preventing from opening, so at least we can think constructively, is there any way we can solve these issues or get past them? And without that, I think we just feel like we're in the dark and we just don't see any light at the end of the tunnel with this. You know, like a lot of the other parents, I'm not happy, my kids are not happy with remote school. At least my kindergartner has full time, but my 3rd grader does not. It's not good for her mentally. It's not good for her educationally. And similarly, I think it would just be helpful to have presentations to understand what's guiding the school closures. Because again, as the other parents said, I'm just not following what is guiding these decisions. It doesn't seem to be according to any science or guidelines that I know. So I think just more information on those 2 points would be very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. There's no more public comment, Lauren.
Thank you, Melissa. Are there any board members that have comments this evening?
I guess I would just recommend sometimes that, because we don't really respond to specific questions during comment period, but I hear a lot of frustration, and you know, I do think people should consider calling in to the specific teacher or the principal about problems if they're seeing videos used that aren't effective, or you have questions about. It's very important to go to the source. That's not really a board issue. That is something for you to take directly to the teacher and the principal if needed, after you've contacted the teacher and discussed it. There have been several presentations about the reasons we're in hybrid, and maybe we can consolidate that again and post it. But we have gotten very specific feedback from principals about the staff and how they feel about coming back full time, and our inability to, you know, we don't want to replace the entire staff. It just wouldn't be effective, and it's unaffordable. So I think the reasons the last caller cited are really the reasons. It's not vague. It's actually quite clear as to why it's not tenable. So I again, just keep, you know, reach out to a specific person who you can call and talk to, and hopefully resolve, or at least get clarity around your issues, because a lot of these are not things that can be answered during board meetings.
Thank you, Allison. I just wanted to apologize to the community member for whom I misstated their last name. I apologize. I only saw the first name, and I'm glad we got clarity about your identity. Thank you. And I apologize to both of you. And I just want to reiterate what Allison has stated. The board has seen presentations from the building leaders, both in September and October, about the reasons why it is the most feasible state for us to remain in the hybrid model. And I encourage community members to review those meetings if they haven't already seen them, to understand the nuances that the principals shared with the board, and with the different directors also spoke to the board in regard to staffing, in regard to space allocation, and other operational concerns that have demanded that we remain as we are. In regards to school closures, I just want to state that the superintendent and principals are in ongoing conversation with the Westchester County Department of Health regarding any concerns that we might have about a known case, a pending test regarding a case, and the decisions that are made are disclosed with the amount we're able to disclose them. So if something doesn't make sense, it's primarily because we're not allowed, or the superintendent is not allowed, based on privacy issues, to explain why a certain person might have warranted a closure while another wouldn't. And there are just different degrees of contact that different personnel have in different buildings. And I can assure you that our superintendent is following the protocol that's communicated directly with the Westchester County Department of Health, and that it's not a whim, it's not indifference, it's every consideration is thoroughly investigated and thoroughly referred to with the state agency. So while it may seem that the announcement received today was upsetting or startling, and caused a lot of families and staff members to rethink what school will be like, either as an instructor or as a student tomorrow, it's certainly, we remain with our, as much nimbleness as we can to keep moving forward together as a community. And I know it's unsettling, and I myself have a student at Hillside, so I do understand, and I do appreciate the fact that our educators are also having to pivot to a different model unexpectedly tomorrow. It's on them as well. So I appreciate what they're doing, and I appreciate the entire community having some faith that the decisions that are made with the thoroughness and care that you'd want them to be. Are there any further comments from the board?
Just stepping back in for a quick second, I wanted to reiterate too to the caller who talked about the video issue. That is a serious point, and I do think parents have a role to play because they see a lot of what goes on at home, and it's perfectly fine to reach out to the teacher and say, this is how your child is experiencing something, and open the dialogue there. Teachers do want to hear from you. They are also trying their best, and sometimes certain things they're trying may not be as successful as others. And you can give them that feedback in a way they can hear it and change course a bit. That's helpful for them. So do reach out. They're trying their very best, and it doesn't always hit perfectly. So it takes all of us working together to get this, to improve the situation.
Lauren, I'd like to also add a brief comment. I think we have to realize that our community is excited that we're holding on to the hybrid model. And I say that because what used to seem like a Midwest problem is now right on our borders. New Jersey seems to have gone up 5 to 10-fold. Connecticut has a serious problem. And even in our own state, we are now at 3,000 cases a day, which is triple the amount when we started to plan for hybrid. But that being said, I think I heard about 4 different parents come forward, still asking to see an improvement in our hybrid model. And I would concur with the general opinion that we are not putting the right amount of effort, focus, and work on preparing to improve our hybrid model. If for some reason this stays in New Jersey and Connecticut and our community is better disciplined, we should be ready to move forward with plans to improve the experiences of our first and second graders. And it seems that a lot of our feedback that we hear is of an inevitability that Thanksgiving is coming and obviously we're going to have cases, or that it's moved from the Midwest to New Jersey and obviously we're next. And that might be true. And if that's true, we're lucky we're in hybrid, because 2.5 days a week is so much better than no days a week for families that want in-person learning. But if it's not true and it's not inevitable and our community is disciplined and has more resources and our cases stay low, we need to be prepared to improve on the hybrid model. We've improved on it 3 different times so far. So what we hear is 4 parents, and I'd say this to the parents: you're not in the majority unless you can organize again and prove to the principals and the administrators that you have the backing of 200 to 300 other families. We love hearing your opinions and ideas. It's sad to hear of the disappointment watching your kids watch screen time, but the principals and the administrators are leaning towards maintaining hybrid. And if that is not where you want, you need to prove that there is a large consensus of people that want to see an improvement in hybrid. As of right now, it seems like we are just thrilled to be holding on to hybrid, as New Jersey and Connecticut are so much worse than New York right now. And there is no wall between New Jersey and New York and Connecticut. Thank you for bringing your comments to the board.
I just want to make one comment before we wrap up here. You know, the comments, just make it really clear to the public that the comments that Jeremy just mentioned are his personal comments. There is no guarantee that 200 to 300 people that show up, the board will waffle and change. Not to say that we're not looking at ways that we can improve things, but I don't want people to think that a 200 or 300 person petition changes things overnight. We talked about this in September and October, that we thought that the cases would go up. And what Jeremy just mentioned, cases are going up in towns that are near us. You know, it's a good point that, you know, maybe cases won't go up, maybe they will go up. But I just want to make it really clear that there's board comments and there's personal comments, and these are my personal comments. But I know that 200 to 300 people that come because they heard, you know, someone at a board meeting say, you know, come in and galvanize, will not change the way I feel about, you know, the fact that, you know, we have a plan for the next couple months that I think makes a lot of sense. So, you know, I just want to make it really clear that that was not a, you know, please go and bring a petition so that we can, you know, tell the administration something different. It's, you know, the board is 7 people with 7 personal opinions, and we have to all come together as one to create, you know, governance.
I just want to follow up on both Jeremy's. I also think that it's important. Look, we live in a community with a lot of different opinions. There's not just one or the other here. We have a lot of people who live in our community who are experts in a lot of areas related to COVID. We hear from them. But I would agree that I don't, I second what Jeremy Arnon just said, that I don't think that this is a call for people to start getting petitions together and coming to the board or coming to Valerie and the administration. I think we've been working hard to try to do the best that we can, and may not be perfect, and we make changes and we've made adjustments, but I really feel strongly that we have to listen to the experts in the school. We have to listen to Valerie, to Melissa, to what the principal, to Lou and Amy and Jennifer. And they are working very hard to have us do what's in the best interest of the students. And this is not about getting together and signing petitions at this point. That's not how we're going to be making, that's not how we're making decisions, and it's not going to be what we do going forward. So I would second that and urge us to continue to try to work together with everybody's voices being heard. Don't get me wrong. You're welcome to come to a board meeting or write to us. But organizing at this moment, I don't think would be helpful.
Well, I'll jump back in there then, guys. And definitely those are my private thoughts. Those are my personal thoughts. I think that's thank you, Jeremy. That is helpful. The board tries to speak as one, and sometimes we try to speak as individuals. But I will give an example. Our first grade class has 88 parents, and our administration has been resistant to polling those 88 parents to find out whether or not they are interested in maintaining hybrid AM/PM, or how many of them would like to consider an improvement in the number of days in person. And any petition, since we're not doing any polling, it is up to the parents to organize if you want to find and have more influence, because our administrators and principals are working to maintain hybrid. And it seems that is what they believe is the best course forward. Maintaining hybrid has so many successes, and that is their judgment that we should be doing everything we can to maintain hybrid. And if the parents who are coming saying they want more, you are not going to convince people with 4 or 5 people. So I would put forth my idea that if the first grade parents want more than that, they need to speak as a voice, because there's no polls coming. They're not sending out any polls to ask you whether or not you're happy with AM/PM. So take it as you want.
I'm not going to speak further on polls coming or not coming. I think that my previous advice about reviewing the experts from the school buildings to describe the reasons why the recommendations were brought from Valerie to the board to remain in hybrid are worth reviewing. Those work sessions are available on the district website. I think one thing we can do is really not lapse into COVID fatigue. One thing we can do is wear our masks, encourage our children to, up our hand hygiene, limit contacts in other people's houses, try to keep engagement with friends outdoors among your own children. Those are real things that can keep our community healthy and provide us with more options going forward into the colder months. try to find opportunities for engagement outside socially and not indoors through the holidays. These are things we can do. And I encourage us to really rely on our school leaders to provide us with the direction. And we'll be meeting again as a board in 2 weeks. Encourage the community to attend. I want to wish everyone a recognition of Veterans Day on Wednesday, and smooth parent-teacher conferences if you have them coming up. And one other last encouragement is to view our school's presentation that occurred last week on November 4th. It was a link to it was in the superintendent's update on Friday. I encourage you to watch it because many students and many teachers provided fine examples of the types of engaged learning that we want to see throughout the district. Is there a motion to close the Board of Education meeting?
So moved.
And a second? All in favor? Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Okay.
Good night.
Thanks, Lauren. Thanks, Allison.